There are 4 main negative beliefs that are all too common that are ruining your sex life. We are going to cover each of them and also give you the answer to unfuck your sex life. Welcome to the Pleasure Program. My name is Holly.
I'm Victoria.
We are 2 licensed therapists who specialize in sex therapy, here to answer your questions and share our knowledge around all things related to a healthy and pleasurable sex life. This video is part of our Pleasure Program Quickie series, where we cover a topic in sex education relatively quickly. The information in our video tonight is coming from one of our favorite books, Magnificent Sex. We will link it in the description box below. Please check it out. It's a fantastic book. This book covers what people who have magnificent sex all have in common. It's basically one big research study. Very readable, very short. All 4 of the negative beliefs that we are covering in our video reduce the quality of your sex life.
The first one is that sex is really only for young, thin, able-bodied people. Right? You see this all the time. Like, if people talk about their parents or their grandparents or older people having sex, they're like, ugh. And that's usually around age, right? They think sex is only for young people who are able-bodied, they're not limping or using a cane or struggling in some kind of way. And also they're thin, right? Thin is associated with being, in our culture, being very attractive or desirable, and we associate that desirability with sex. So that can get in the way because it might be impacting your own insecurities, and if you're not feeling young or thin or able-bodied, then you may not be feeling sexually desirable
or attractive. Like, I'm thinking of common shows like Too Hot to Handle on Netflix, or The Bachelor, or The
Love
Bachelorette,
Island.
or right. I mean, all of these individuals.
Yeah.
We could even scale back and think about when we think who is deserving or worthy of a hot sex life or even love. This is the image we are shown time and time again on repeat, that they are young, they are attractive, thin, and like no one's battling a chronic illness, no one has an amputated leg, no one is over the age of like 34. And so we start to develop this belief that these are the people having great sex.
Right. You can often see too, if someone is wheelchair bound, there's lots of like question marks around like their sex life, like it may be any less desirable or achievable, right?
For people that are having magnificent, fantastic sex, what is their perspective that they have related to this? They tend to believe that all people are deserving and worthy of high quality sex, regardless of your age, regardless of your physical ability, your weight, your height, how stereotypically attractive you are. And they look at anyone as having the worth to have great sex. I would imagine
Sex for everybody.
They're not, when they hear that, like, elderly people are still hooking up, they're not like, ugh, right? Like, they don't have that kind of response. They are accepting and welcoming of everyone having pleasure and sex as part of their life experience.
Yeah, and they're not looking at themselves and their weight or their age or their ability and thinking that that's a barrier to their pleasure.
Right. Okay, the second most common negative belief that is ruining your sex life is that sex is about penetration and orgasm. So we tend to have a pretty narrow perspective of what sex really is, and that generally involves this idea of heterosexual sex acts, penis in vagina penetration, and both people achieve orgasm, and typically through that means. Why is this a problem? Because it's very rigid, pun intended. That's what she said. It's a very narrow and rigid perspective to have, and it's very goal driven. And what we know, we have so many videos on this. We will link some of them below. But when you tend to be very goal-oriented and focused on orgasm, achieving orgasm, and that being the primary goal, it tends to put unnecessary pressure on the experience and can create some anxiety if either partner tends to struggle with orgasm or takes a while. It also limits your options for how to experience pleasure and enjoy the experience and enjoy the journey, whether orgasm is achieved or not. So, yeah, it really reduces...
And it connects to the able-bodied people thing that we were just talking about. There are people out there that cannot achieve orgasm or can't achieve an erection to engage in penetration even. And so we're cutting out a whole group of people saying that they're not worthy of sex and pleasure.
And if you fall into that category, you think you're not worthy, or I guess, you just throw in the towel that sex is just going to suck for you. If this is your way of defining what sex is, which is penetration to achieve orgasm, and that's about it.
To change this perspective, I feel like it's pretty simple, is that we have to focus on pleasure. Pleasure can have nothing to do with penetration, and it also can have nothing to do with orgasm. Someone can be experiencing pleasure emotionally, mentally, physically, and not be achieving orgasm, and that can be a really worthwhile experience.
Yeah. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Explore all aspects of pleasure, all body parts that can participate, and take one's time. Also, if your partner is has a clitoris, then if we're just focusing on penetration, we're also missing the most common primary source of pleasure, which would be the clitoris. So also, if we're just focusing on penetration and orgasm, that limits you to a whole wide world of possibility.
The next negative belief that's ruining your sex life is that sex is spontaneous and natural. We see this all the time. We may ask our clients to schedule sex dates or intimacy dates with their partner, or talk more about sex with their partner. And there might be some resistance to it because they're feeling like that takes the heat out of it because it's not spontaneous. People feel like they're not desired unless it's natural and it's spontaneous and you're just ripping each other's clothes off when you see each other without any sort of communication around it. And so this can definitely ruin your sex life because it's really normal and common for people to struggle with spontaneous sex. And so if you're feeling like sex has to be spontaneous to be worthwhile or to mean that you're desirable, you're probably going to be left at some point feeling frustrated, feeling neglected, or feeling pressure to provide that when maybe that's not really what works for you.
Yeah, I think people, when they don't find that they're feeling spontaneous desire in the moment with their partner at the same time, they start to wonder if they've lost chemistry, if they've fallen out of love, if they're not compatible, and the thoughts can really spiral and people think that they're broken or something's wrong with them or their relationship.
Yeah.
So, people that are having great sex, what's their perspective? They have a more comprehensive understanding of what desire really means. They view sex as being something that is intentional, that requires your attention, some focus and effort, and that your sex life is something you choose to prioritize. There's always going to be something else that will get in the way. Life will get too busy, or schedules get crazy, or you go through difficult seasons in life. But people who are having great sex are just simply prioritizing their sex life, and they're choosing to make sure they don't lose sight of that. They also have a very profound awareness of themselves and their partners. So they really understand themselves well. What helps them get into that erotic state of mind? What helps their partner get into an erotic state of mind? And they communicate around that with their partner. So they can really learn how do we get there? If it's not happening spontaneously, how do we create the opportunity to feel open to sex with their partner? We also have videos about spontaneous desire versus responsive desire that we will link below, and we really encourage you to check out because it really breaks all of this down for you.
Really shows you why someone may not have spontaneous desire and show that they still want you and they're still actually desiring you. It's just not as obvious as you might like it to be.
People who are having great sex, they just accept that your sex life ebbs and flows sometimes, and they don't have super high expectations that they're always going to have great sex and that it needs to happen every time they're in the mood, or that they don't have the expectation that them and their partner need to be in the mood at the same time. So they're just more flexible with their expectations, and they do their best to create the circumstances that are required to be sexual with their partner. The fourth and final negative belief that is ruining your sex life is that great sex only happens at the beginning of a relationship. This is a common one. We think that new relationship energy, hot and heavy sex is happening right after you've met someone and you're really interested in each other. And there's a grain of truth to this because, you know, that novelty and the adrenaline rush that you get when you're getting to know someone can really drive desire. And so, like we just spoke about a moment ago, sex can feel very spontaneous because you're really priming yourself to be in that state of mind very often. Here's why it's ruining your sex life, because then you just think, well, we're destined to kind of have sucky sex as our relationship develops, or maybe our sex life will just die and might as well enjoy it while it lasts. And so it really can throw a wrench. This belief really throws a wrench in the whole trajectory of your relationship if you're in a longer term relationship.
Research shows that those who are having magnificent sex, they don't have this belief. They don't feel like great sex only happens at the beginning. The way that they view sex is that it improves with time, right? And I think that's really valid. With time, you get experience not only with yourself, but maybe with your partner. You develop wisdom and a comfortability, and new things can be unlocked through that way, right? Like as you develop that connection and deepen your care for one another, or deepen your comfortability with one another, so you can talk about different things of like, what is producing pleasure, or what fantasies do we have surrounding pleasure, that can really make great sex happen more later than at the beginning.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think you have to get to a place where you're really able to be comfortable, safe, and vulnerable with someone to maybe explore some of those other aspects of your sexuality. Maybe it's a kink you're interested in, or just simply like there's something about just the longevity of experience with a partner where you really know each other's bodies well, and you really know how to turn each other on. You sort of learned all of those little nuts and bolts. So that really improves the quality of the sex you're having. And let's also just, as we age, we get more experienced and more comfortable and confident in a variety of areas in life. And your sex life really isn't that different. As people get older, they often feel more, contrary to popular beliefs, they often feel more confident in their bodies, or just secure in their bodies. Like, this is who I am, this is how I look. I'm not, expecting myself to appear young and hot and fit and tight. Like, you're just a little bit more like comfortable in your own skin, and you can let go of some of those pressures or expectations you're placing on yourself and have a more liberated experience. So if you're listening to this and you're young, you're in your 20s, and you think this is as good as it gets, you are incorrect. It will get better.
Yeah.
So that's that. The 4 common negative beliefs that are ruining your sex life, and
Counter perspective.
Yeah, the counter perspective from research, from people who are having really great sex. So we hope that this video inspires you to challenge some beliefs you might have. If any of this resonates with you, we hope that it inspires you to consider a new perspective. Give our video a like, consider subscribing, watch some of our other videos that are linked in the description box, and we will see you in our next one.